We are going to be doing factoring by grouping and also factoring quadratic trinomials when the a value is not 1 on this video right here. But right now we're going to go for a very basic one. It's a quadratic trinomial where our a value is 1. So right off the bat, you could jump right into this. Why are we able to jump right into this factored format? Because x times x really is x squared. Now, if you had a number out here like a 5 or like a 12, you wouldn't be able to do this because x times x would not give you a 5x squared. But anyway, you're able to set this up because the a value is 1. And when the a value is 1 on a quadratic trinomial, I always say, what times what is the c value, which is negative 32, that if I combine together is the b value, which is positive 12. And I always say make a list, right? How could you get negative 32? Just begin with the easiest one, times 1, or actually times negative 1. So negative 1 times 32, that'll give you a negative 32. Then go to the next number. How about 2? 2 times something give you 32? Yeah, 16. Go to the next number, negative 3. That's not going to work. 3 times 10 is 30, not 32. 3 times 11 is 33. Move on to 4. 4 times 8, right? 5 is not going to work. 6 is not going to work. 7 is not going to work. So that's it. Those are the 3 possible ways of multiplying 2 numbers together to give you negative 32. Which pair of numbers combines together to give us 12? If you add 32 and minus 1, that'll give you a 31. That's not 31. Now, if you go 16 and negative 2, that gives you 14. That's not 14, right? If you go 8 and negative 4, what does that give you? 4, not 12. Now, if you change the sign to a plus and to a minus, it's still going to give you a negative 4 instead of a positive 12. So the bottom line here is that you've tried every possible combination and it doesn't work. You're not able to do it. So what do we say? We say not factorable. Okay, I've been throwing out these non-factorable ones a lot. They don't really happen that often, but they do happen, right? So I want you guys to always be on the lookout. If you can't do it, if you wrote your entire list and you can't do it, then simply you're not able to factor it. It's not factorable. Or you could also write the word prime if you'd like. Yay? Okay, now what if, let me do a couple of sign changes here. What if we had this and I asked you to factor? Well, that's nice and easy. Again, because the a value is 1, you're able to set this up. Parenthesis, xx. Think what times what is 32, the c value, that if you combine together is the b value of negative 12. So this is a positive 32. That's a lot nicer. How could you get 32? 1 times 32. 2 times 16. 3 doesn't work. 4 times 8. 5 doesn't work. 6 doesn't work. 7 doesn't work. That's it. So those are the 3 pair of numbers. Which of these 3 pair of numbers combines together to give us 12?
Negative 4 and negative 8.
Yep. 4 and 8 gives us 12, so we need to change it to a negative 4 and a negative 8 because we want a negative 12. So, bless you. When you add them, 4 plus 8 is 12. You have 12. When you notice, oh, it's the wrong sign, you have the right numbers, you just have the wrong signs, so just simply change them to a minus 4 and a minus 8. Minus 4 right there, minus 8 right there, you are done. Yay? Okay. Now, if you wanted to, you could distribute to double check and see if it actually works, and it will. Check this one out. Let's do the same problem, but let's factor by grouping. Now, this is the absolute worst idea to factor this by grouping if your a value is 1. I mean, unless you're bored on a Saturday night, right? You're all lonely. You could definitely pretend that there's an actual number right here and go through this long process of step 1 would be multiply a times c, get an answer. Step 2, think of the multiples of that answer that combine to give you b. Make a list. Step 3, use that pair of numbers to rewrite your middle value as 2 terms, giving you a total of 4 terms instead of 3 terms. And then step 4, factoring by grouping. So that's a horrible idea to factor this because we saw how easy it was to factor. But just for funsies here, just to practice, I would like you to do that. So let's walk through the steps here, all right? Step 1 would be to multiply a times c. Everybody should write down the number 1, write down a times c, identify a as 1, identify your c as 32. When you multiply those, you really do get 32. So that's your answer for step 1. Step 2, make a list of that answer, the multiples of that answer. How could we get 32? You got 1 times 32. We said 2 times 16. And we also said 3 doesn't work, 4 times 8. And that's all the possible ways of getting 32. Now, which pair of numbers combines together to give us the middle value, which happens to be negative 12 in this case? Again, 4 and 8, but we need to change those signs to a negative and a negative. That way, when you combine negative 4 plus negative 8, it really does give you that middle value, negative 12. Now, this is where it gets weird. If we go back to the notes here, this is where it gets weird. You're going to change your middle value of negative 12. You're going to rewrite it as the pair of numbers from step 2, converting your 3-term polynomial, your trinomial, to a 4-term polynomial. Okay, so what we're going to do here is rewrite this guy, but instead of negative 12, what am I going to write?
Negative 8 and negative 4.
Yes, but don't forget about the x's, right? So negative 4x and negative 8x, okay? So let's do that. Let's write down x squared in the front plus 32 in the back, and this guy, we're going to rewrite it in place of the negative 12x. So instead of negative 12x, I want to write negative 4x minus 8x. After all, if you do combine negative 4x and minus 8x, that does give you the original minus 12x that we started with. So what we did here was convert our 3 terms into 4 terms. Why the heck would I want to do that? So I could actually do the final step here, which is step 4, factoring by grouping. And step 4, factoring by grouping, that's another 3 steps in itself. Separate it into 2 groups, factor something out of each group, and then factor out that common binomial from both groups with exaggerated parentheses. So let's go through that and factor this by grouping. Step 1 is to separate it into 2 groups, x squared minus 4x minus 8x plus 32. Step 2, factor out something from each group. So in that first group, what could you pull out? X. In the second group, what could you pull out?
Negative 4.
Negative 4, okay. And you know what? Let's actually pull out the x first, and let's see what happens. So what would I have left? X times what gets us back to the x squared? There you go. X times what gets us back to the minus 4x? Minus 4, okay. So we know that we have a binomial of x minus 4. That's what I would like to have here, right? So when you think of what could you pull out of both of these guys, you could pull out the GCF, which would be negative 8, right? If you say 2, yeah, you could pull out a 2, but there's still more to pull out. If you say 4, yeah, you could pull out a 4, but there's still more to pull out. The GCF, the greatest value you could pull out is 8. And of course, you would like it to be negative. That way, you end up with a positive term here, just like this one, and this one becomes a negative in here. So in other words, negative 8 times what gets you back to a negative 8x? That would simply be just x. Negative 8 times what takes you back to a positive 32? Negative 4. And this is your final step where you factor out the common binomial with exaggerated parentheses. Okay, so let's do some exaggerated parentheses right here. Let's pull out that common binomial of x minus 4. And what do we have left? This x is left. There it is. The minus 8 is left. There it is. That's your answer. Just write it with the correct size parentheses. Any questions? Now, why the heck would I do all of this work? Bless you. The only way I would do all this work is, like I said, if I were bored on a Saturday night feeling lonely, right? Want something to do. But normally, if my a value is 1, I just jump right into parentheses, x. What times what is a c value that if you combine together is a b value. And once you make your list, you'll see, oh, negative 4 times negative 8, that'll give me a positive 32. And if I combine them together, it does give me negative 12. That's the quickest and best way to do it. All right, now, so why did I practice this? So you guys could practice it, because you're going to have to apply it whenever your a value is not 1, right? Right here we had the shortcut because the a value is 1. On this next one, the a value is 5. So you have to actually apply all those steps. Let's copy down this one as our third question on our class opener. I want to pause it, try to do it. I want to walk around, and then after a while, I will explain it on this video. Okay, so again, I recommend being as detailed as possible. Label your steps, right? Step 1 is to multiply a times c. A is 5, c is negative 24. If you do it with the calculator, you will get negative 120. Now, step 2 is to think of the multiples of that answer of negative 120 that combine together to give you the b value, which happens to be a negative 7, right? Now, don't even try to figure that out. Right now, just make a list. And this is the advice I give to all my students. Get a calculator and start with the easiest number. How could you get negative 120? Start with 1. Now, instead of 1, just go negative 1 because it's negative. So negative 1 times 120. That's the first pair of numbers. Then go to negative 2. and then go to negative 3, and then go to negative 4, then go to negative 5, and negative 6, and just keep going, all right? And see which one works, which one doesn't work. So I know that like negative 2 times 60 will give me the 120, right? Now let's say you didn't. All you have to do is get a calculator and take the 120 and divide it by 3, and that'll give you the multiple that you need right here. So 120 divided by 3, that'll be 40. If I go with the calculator, 120 divided by 4, that'll be 30, right? If I go 120 divided by 5, that'll be, what is that, 24? If I go 120 divided by 6, what will that be? 20. So you see how I'm creating my list? You don't even have to think about it. Use the calculator. Let's keep going. 120 divided by 7 with the calculator is not going to work. 120 divided by 8 with the calculator is what? 15. 120 divided by negative 9, that's not going to work. And by negative 10 will work. That'll be 12. And that's it. That's my entire list. That's the only possible ways of multiplying two numbers together to give me negative 120 besides changing signs. So now we actually want to find out which of these pair of numbers will combine together to give us a negative 7. If I combine these guys, it'll give me a 119. This will give me a 58. This will give me a 37. This will give me a 26. This will give me a 19. This will give me a 14. This will give me a what? 7. So this is it. Winner, winner, right here. I don't have to change any. Oh, wait. I do have to change signs, don't I? If I combine negative 8 plus 15, that'll give me a positive 7. And it is a 7, but it should be negative. So I have the right number. I have the wrong sign. I have the right numbers. I just have the wrong signs. So let's change that to a plus 8 and a minus 15 instead of a negative 8 and a positive 15. So here's where it gets weird. Step 3, you're going to rewrite your trinomial as a polynomial by changing your middle value to these two numbers that you found in step 2. So the first number, 5x squared, is going to stay exactly the same. Now, this negative 7x, I'm going to rewrite that as positive 8x minus 15x. So instead of negative 7x, I'm going to write it as positive 8x minus 15x. And at the very end, the minus 24, I'm going to write that at the end. So I've converted my 3-term polynomial to 4-term polynomial. Okay. Now, why do we want that? Because now we could apply step 4, which is factoring by grouping. And factoring by grouping is another 3 steps in itself. The first step on factoring by grouping is to separate it. So you have 5x squared plus 8x space minus 15x minus 24. The second step on factoring by grouping is to set up your parentheses and then pull out what's in common from each group. Even if you can't pull something out, you still pull out a 1, right, in the process of factoring by grouping. So could you pull out anything in the first group? X. So let's pull out that x. What would be left over? 5x and plus 8. Okay. How about the second group? Pull out a negative 3. Now, if you pull out a regular 3, you're going to see that you end up with the opposite signs in here. So you'd have to pull out the negative eventually. It's better to pull out that negative 3 right from the start, so you will have also a positive 5x and a positive 8. And the final step on factoring by grouping is to use exaggerated parentheses and simply pull out that common binomial. What common binomial? This guy right here, the 5x plus 8 in blue. I'm going to pull it out, and it will be right here out in the front, 5x plus 8. And what would be left over? The x is left over right here, and the minus 3 is left over right here. So these guys come straight down. You have the x, you have the minus 3. That's your factored form answer. Okay? So your factored form answer is 5x plus 8 times x minus 3. Now, the instructions say factor it and check your answer. So how could you check your answer? FOIL, right? Distributed property, right? So you should do this if you have time left over. Nobody should be turning in the quiz early. If you have time left over, you should go back to your answers and just do distributed property and see if it actually gives you the original. So to check, let's do this. What is 5x times x?
5x squared.
Thank you. How about 5x times negative 3?
Negative 15x.
Okay. And how about positive 8 times x?
8x.
And how about positive 8 times negative 3?
Negative 24.
There we go. Okay, now out of those four terms, we could combine this middle one with this one. What is negative 15x plus 8x?
Negative 7x.
Okay, so do we end up with 5x squared minus 7x minus 24 at the beginning? Like if I go back to the start, is that what we had? Yes, it is. Right there it is. 5x squared minus 7x minus 24. 5x squared minus 7x minus 24. I am absolutely positive, 100% positive, that this right here is the correct factored form. I know I'm right. I could bet my life on it, right? So you could always go back and check your answers and make sure that you're going to get an A+ on the quiz. Please do so. Anyways, if you have any questions that you haven't done on previous handouts like the class opener or the worksheet from yesterday, please complete that. I hope everybody understands it. If you don't understand it, please stop by my classroom in the morning.